Okay, so what I did was that, as it was mentioned over here, that we have to create a DB subnet group with the name of MySQL, and for that we need to have at least 2 private subnets. So what I did was that I quickly went to my VPC dashboard, and in that I already had one VPC created. So I went into the subnet and I created 2 new subnet naming MySQL1 and MySQL2 with my CIDR blocks as 10.0.4.0 and 10.0.4.3, 10.0.3.0. So in this way, I have created 2 new subnets in my existing VPC, which was CMPE281. Then I quickly went to the Amazon RDS part, and in that I went to the subnet groups, and I created using this create new DB subnet group. I created and I followed the naming convention as which was mentioned in this part. So I created this MySQL group, and in that I have those 2, 4, and 3 in this in this subnet group, DB subnet group. Then I went to the instances and I created, with the help of this dashboard, I launched a new DB instance, and I followed all the parameters as they were mentioned in this part of the midterm exam paper. And what I was able to configure at the end was that, which I can show you inside, that MySQL was available in the form of this part, and in which so what I did was I disabled publicly accessible. I disabled those things, so it is not publicly accessible. Port is the default MySQL port, and I got my endpoint as this. What one change I had to do in this part was that my jump box was configured on the IP address as 10.1.0, which basically comes under this subnet, or maybe this CIDR block, I should say. And because of that, as it was coming under this, then it was initially it was allowing only these 2. So what I did was I went into this. I went into this thing, which is now being loaded, and I added this CIDR block inside this. So once I added that CIDR block inside this, which is coming up, I think it is taking time. Once I added into this, I was quickly now I'll be able to get access to this MySQL instance with the help of my jump box. So over here in the inbound rules, I added that range and with allowing the all ports, and I could have done it with only 3306, but as it was only in my VPC, and this block will only be available in my AWS instance, so there is no chance that someone else can access this from public. So once I had configured this, at the end, what I did, the next step was to check if I'm able to access that SQL instance from the jump box. So this is my jump box, and jump box is basically my Docker host, which I have already have with my public IP as this. So what I did was I went to the jump box and I tried to test with the help of the commands which were mentioned in this part. So I had installed this MySQL client earlier, and with the help of this part, I'll be able to access it. So as my host and configurations are like this. So now I need to enter the password as midterm 281. When I enter, I'm able to access it, and I'm able to see that I have one CMPE281 database, and I can do a select star from the bottom. Start from the bottom. I can see my, yeah. So basically initially I added it. So now I'm only checking that if I have those numbers available or not. Then what I did was, the next part was to configure my Redis instance. So what I did was that I went onto the dashboard of Elastic Cache Management dashboard, and there in which and in that I selected this Redis, and I went into this create part. So with the help of this, I was able to create this Redis instance, and then I had this as my configuration came out to be as this, whose name was this, and I got this URL as this. So once I got this URL and I was able to and configured it with this, so I checked it quickly by installing the Redis client. So I have already installed my Redis client, and now I'm going to check with my jump box that if I'm able to access that Redis instance or not. So I'll go to, okay, so I'm already in the Redis client source folder. So I just need to run this Redis CLI command, which I'm already in, so now I'm able to see that I'm successfully able to connect it. And when I do keys, okay, keys dot star, I'm able to see my keys. So from my jump box, both of these instances I'm able to connect successfully. So my first part is now completed with Redis cache is installed, and my subnet of and with the help of two new subnets and DB subnet group, I have able to successfully create a MySQL RDS instance. Then my next step was then I created this document in order to submit it, and I also followed this steps in order to add the data in that. And as I showed you before, that I'm able to get the data, and I'm also able to see the keys from my jump box. Then the next part was to modify the Go and Go code, so they are able to, so that Go code is able to connect to my MySQL server in this. So what I did was I downloaded my Go and the node code locally, and in that Go I went to server.js, and in that I updated this. So my password, so my root user admin name, admin is the name of the root user. So the username is this, its password is CMPE281, and this was the URL of my SQL RDS instance. And in the same way, I configured the Redis URL in the Redis Connect this part. So now this was the Go Gumball code change. This was the only Go Gumball code change which was necessary at this moment, and so I updated both these URLs. So once I was able to update these URLs, what I did was I created in my local Docker host in my local system, I created an image and tagged it so that I can send it to my Docker Hub. So as you can see that this is my Docker Hub, and this is my Docker Hub with my username. And I pushed that Gumball image of the code I got from got in the midterm over here. So now I can access it from the other Docker host anywhere, and so that I can easily access this code from anywhere. Otherwise, I would have need to do the SCP command to those instances, and I have to build it on those servers. So I found it. This was the really easy way. So I added it into the Docker Hub. Now now, as you can see, that next part is required in this is that build the code and deploy it to AWS as two AWS instances. So my approach in this was that I went to the Docker host, which I used to use in my labs in my previous weeks and till date. So what I did was I created an image out of this Docker host. So I was able to create an image in this part. And once I was able to image and like successfully image was created, I created two new instances with the help of that image, and I named them as Gumball Docker 1 and Gumball Docker 2. So with this way, Gumball Docker 1 and Gumball Docker 2 were created. And if you can see at least one, then I have no public IP assigned because they were created in private subnet, and this is the IP of my private subnet. So if we can see in my So if you can see in my VPC, then this US West 1A has this private part and 1.0 sub CIDR block, and that I have added in that private subnet. So I'm getting this IP address in my management. I'm getting as this IP address from 10.0.1. So now my Docker host 1 and Docker Gumball 2 are already now I have up. So what I did was I went into those systems and I pulled the image out of my Docker host by logging into my Docker account, Docker Hub, and I started the Docker instances. So how I did was that I first went to my jump box. I'll quickly exit from this part, and over here I did was so I have my PEM file over here. So what I do was I'll try to go to those IPs as they are sent to us instances. So I'm able to go into those instances, and if we can see sudo and this was the image. Hey, it's Vajid Gumball, which I pushed over there, and that my image is running over here with my 3000 port open as public, and inside also 3000. So what I did was I started the Gumball API with the help of which I did was pull. I can see in my history that the pull command is already here, and then I started that image. So once I started that image, I was able to curl on my local host. So if I do curl to 3000/ping, so I'm able to call on my local host. So I knew that my image is up over here successfully. Then what I did was I went back to my the jump box, and I did my curl, the same curl which I did over here. But now I need to assign the IP address. So the IP address was 10.0.1.68, and I'm able to call from here. So I'm able to access my Gumball API, which is running on my Docker host in the private subnet from my jump box. So this way I did for two servers, and as you can see, the Gumball Docker 1 and Gumball Docker 2, they both have the same steps, and the both systems were up properly. So my next part, what I did was, then I had to put this behind an internal load balancer. So I quickly went to the load balancer part. So this is my load balancer configuration. What I did was I created a load balancer with the help of this configuration, and in the create part, so basically what I wanted to show was that I have selected that internal checkbox as true. So when we go to this, so I selected this create an internal load balancer, and I gave my VPC as my this VPC, and in over here, if we can go back and see my actual configuration, then my midterm is configured with my instances available in service. Those two, Gumball Docker 1 and Gumball Docker 2, they both were up. And in the health check, I had to give this ping because that only that API is available at ping and at port 3000. And in terms of listeners, what I did was that my load balancer will listen to on 8080 port, and it will forward it to the 3000 of my instance port, because 3000 I have used 3000 as my public port on my Docker instances, whereas my load balancer will take the request on 8080. So when I did the health checks was successful, and as a result, the services were in like the services were available in the inside the both the Docker containers, both the Docker host which I have with my Gumball APIs were up, and they were the status is showing as in service. So if we do a call over here, so instead of 3000, now what we need to do is internal balancer, and this is listening on 8080. So I'm able to listen with the help of my curl, and this is I'm doing it from my jump box. So that's why I'm able to hear. That's why I'm able to have this curl response. Otherwise, I won't be able to do, because this is an internal load balancer. So this step is completed, wherein I have created my internal load balancer. Then what I did was that both my Docker instance for both the Docker instance are up, and this. So now my next, moving on to the next part. If we can see here, then I have to create that all instances should be in private network, which I have satisfied the condition. So then I did these commands from curl commands using the ELB load, using the ELB commands, using the curl, using the ELB URL, and I was able to successfully do it. And as we have already seen that I'm able to I'm able to connect the Gumball in from the MySQL Gumball table in MySQL, and also the Redis keys I'm able to get. So now so now the submission is complete, and now I went to the deploying Kong part. So what I did was I went to my Docker host, my Docker host is I'm using it as my jump box. So if we can see there, if I can do Docker PS over here, then my Kong is running, and I haven't opened any Cassandra ports. So when we see that Cassandra is running on these internal IP addresses, because as they both are in the same network, so I don't need to have any ports open, and also I can provide it with the help of while starting Kong, I provided name of the Cassandra, the image as Kong database, so that you can easily resolve it, because they both are in the same network. So my Kong is running and my Cassandra is running. So if we can check from my this jumpbox IP address, jumpbox IP address is this. So if we can get the status, then my Gumball status, Kong server status, then I'm able to access this, because my IP address over here is same as the jumpbox. So that means my Kong API is up on my Kong API is running successfully on my jump box. Now what I had to do was I had to configure an API. So if you can check, then list of APIs, then I already configured it. but instead of localhost, I'll use my IP address. So I configured it, and while configuring the URL for configuring the API in Kong gateway, what I did was in upstream URL, I passed the URL of my load balancer instead of directly passing it of that Docker instances. So I passed it on load balancer, which is listening from 8080. So I had to provide an 8080 port over here. So now if you can check that let's say if we check an inventory using the Go API rather than directly going from Elastic Load Balancer, then I can see that. Okay, so authentication, I need to change this. So I'm able to get the APIs. I'm able to get the response from Kong Gateway if I add my API key authentication, which I have already done. So that's why he's asking for authentication. So what I did was next was that once I added an API with the help of this add API post, I was able to add it. And once I added it, I added the plugin, which was keyauth plugin. And with the help of this keyauth plugin, and then I added the client using this URL. So my client was API client with the name of an API client. And then at the end, for this API client, I generated the key. So once I generated the key, my next step was that I had to check if I'm able to access it without the key or not. So I went over here, and if we can check then. As you can see, it is saying that no API key found in header. And similarly, if we go and check over here, then I'll be able to access it because I am passing my key in the header part. So my configuration was completed with the help of this part, wherein I followed 4 steps. I added the API, added the plugin, which was the API key authentication plugin. Then I created a consumer, and for that consumer, I created a key. So now I can access it with the help of that key. So my next step in terms of going into this part was that I had the Docker commands. I had saved those, so I was able to successfully submit it. And post that, I was able to curl. So as we have seen that I'm able to access from Postman. So similarly, I generated the curl codes and then I ran the curl codes. So I was able to access it from those codes also. And then the commands, which this was also was able to done. I was able to do it properly. So now last step was to modify the Node.js on local Docker instance. So what I did was that in this part of Node.js, I went to in the Node.js code, I went to the app.js and I had to change this API key, which I had generated. So this API key was updated and the Gumball endpoint and the order endpoint had to be changed. So this is the URL, or I should say the IP of my Docker host wherein my Kong gateway is running. And that Kong gateway will listen to 8000 for the API gateway, and /go API is what I have configured, and /gumball is where I want to go. And similarly, /order is where I want to go for this part. So I updated these two URLs, and at the same time also updated this API key. And once I updated this API keys, what I did was I started my local Docker, and with the help of this, I built the code. So as you can see that my build command is already, I'm able to see this. So with the help of Docker build, and I named it as midterm Node.js, and then I ran that instance with the help, and I gave my name as midterm Node.js and in the Gumball network. So now when I do Docker PS, which is this command, Docker PS, I'm able to see that my midterm Node.js is up. So the next part is my midterm Node.js is up and it's listening outside at port 8080. So I'll go to check on my local browser. And as I'm using my Windows PC, so when local host won't work, and I got this IP address for my for accessing this server, I get this IP address instead of localhost. And if you can see in Kitematic, then the image is running, and in terms of web preview, if we can go to this part, then I am getting 192.168. So I'm able to access that URL in my local PC with where it is deployed on Docker container. So if I do insert water, then my state has been changed to hascoin. And once my state has coin, then I am getting when I turn crank, I'm successfully getting my order ID, and it is saying that order has been placed. So once this order has been placed, and If I do insert pointer again, then it says that order interface. So first, I have successfully deployed my Node.js frontend in my front part. So basically, I have covered all the steps which were mentioned in this part. So all the steps which were mentioned in this part. So this all the screenshots I was able to take all the screenshot to create my final submission. So this is from my side, and thank you so much for allowing us to take one more instance. And I'm Vajid Kagdi, and now I'll stop the recording.